So, we've talked about how Fallout 4 is really generic. Basically, we know it was the repeatable quests assigned to major factions that made them factions feel generic. And then they were placed in a generic world where everything was the same. We needed something more unique, something that stood out. And I think when we saw the Brotherhood of Steel landing in the area, we saw an example of what needed to be done, what we needed to have more of. If you take Nuka World, if you took a pirate approach where they instead of they taking over settlements, then the settlements failed because they starved to death because of a bug, because they failed to consider the fact that pirates weren't good at farming, right? If we took a pirate approach where, pirates or raider settlements had to survive by raiding, and they would raid other settlements for food, then basically you wouldn't need farms. You wouldn't need farms. You'd see little gangs being sent out to raid and come back with food instead. So the farmers would be assigned to raiding. That would change the whole nature of a settlement. Instead of people being assigned to farmers with a hoe, they'd be given a rifle and told to go somewhere. It'd bring the settlements to life as they raided each other for food. It'd be a lot more violent place, but Nuka World would work. It would suddenly be more interesting DLC than it was. Because right now, the DLC, the way it worked, it was a bit of a letdown, like a damp squid. I mean, it looks okay to play, but once you've done, that's it, it's over. Far Harbour, on the other hand, they nailed it. Far Harbour absolutely got it dead on. You watch into a rope thing, your very first impression of the place was just spot on. Being attacked by creatures from the mist, and then various settlements inside the island. Even the robot areas and stuff like that. I mean, it was all just right, and side quests and puzzles to solve and mysteries and stuff. I mean, they got it right. The rest of the game, though, didn't have that. It lacked that. It was almost like, see, when I make a mod, 97% is the boring stuff that needs to be done to make it work. The 3% at the end is what makes something good. So you've got to do all the boring stuff to get to that 3%, which is exciting for both me to make and you to play. Fallout felt like they got to the 97% and then stopped. They needed to go that extra mile. Now, if we look at Far Harbour as a way of making the world interesting, we look at, say, Yucca World as an area where it fell short, and we look at the Brotherhood of Steel as a fine example of what the rest of the space needed, a faction that would influence the world around it, then we needed more factions like the Brotherhood of Steel. Factions that would take over a settlement and then just affect the world. So when you're walking around the world, you'd bump into them, either good or bad. You could have had a pirate faction off the coast that raided settlements, just like Nuka World idea, and they would have affected the area in one part of the map. When you go to that part of the map, you'd think pirates. Go to another part of the map, you'd think Brotherhood of Steel. It'd have made each area individually different. So instead, we got a very generic feel about anywhere you go. I mean, if you could have gone, if you look at Fallout New Vegas, where I can't remember the name, it's Starlight, is it, this town, or something like that, full of ghouls, that would have been an example of what was different, you see. And then you've got various other places, like New Vegas itself is different. Say the Boomers, that was different. You see the formula here, it was lacking in Fallout 4. I mean, you could go to the radiation area, but that was one of the few areas that did feel different. The rest of it was a little bit of a letdown. So we needed more factions in the world that had their own agenda, had a vastly different style of play, and had unique quests. And if we did it so they could align with certain player actions, so if the player did a bit of raiding, had a bit of a reputation, they might like him. If he was squeaky clean, they might not. And we aligned it with that, then we can have our gameplay change from game to game depending on what the player did. Something I'm quite good at. So if I was to do it now, if I was to make a mod now, I'd start by trying to think up a faction. Because the Institute wasn't a very good faction and the Minutemen were a bit bland and boring. I'd be trying to think up a new faction, right? Like I did with Fallout 3 when I made the Foundation. So something that suited the world. It could even be a baseball team, like, that turned into a gang. Maybe they took over Diamond City, that kind of thing. Right? But anyway, it could be anything. I think of a theme: slavery, drugs, whatever they were into. That would be their primary theme. That would be what they're trying to sell or push on the world. Then I'd have quests that support that, and I'd have a background story that supports that, with implications and things. Like with the pirates, for instance, if you've shown pirates on Nuka World, things will automatically start raiding other factions to bring food in because they're not farmers after all. Right? They did that with you, with or without your help. You immediately have a choice when you see them. You know, first time you see them, you either join them or you shoot them, and that decides whether they're going to be friends or enemies. If they're friends, then you'll be raiding settlements with them from their settlements, and you'll find their settlements friendly and other settlements hostile. And if you wipe out everybody in a settlement, it's dead until a new settler arrives. You see? And you might find if the settlers are used to being raided, and they might build up their defences, settlements might grow stronger over time. Again, the world becomes a living, breathing world based on the actions of the player and what they did or didn't do. This would make the game a lot less bland and a lot more interesting and give it a bit of meat that it so badly needed. Now, as for factions that could be in the game that could be used, the Institute I felt was really badly thought out. Right, it had a very nefarious kind of feel about it when you tell the story. When you see squeaky clean scientists, I'm thinking, well, the Institute would probably be better if it was really darker and not so white and shiny. With white and shiny robots in the street shooting everybody in sight. That's a missed opportunity. That's just laziness, I think. With the Minutemen, they were a bit better, but they were a bit boring. And the Railroad, again, repeatable quests as their main plotline, with only a few unique ones thrown in. So that was a missed opportunity. But I think, the way the game originally played, where the end of plot actions would make you an enemy, you had to cause you to destroy certain factions or leave some factions alone. I believe they changed it in the end. Right, but when you first got the game, certain factions would have to die for the plot to end, and you have to really know the game to really play around these limitations to leave the factions alive. But they was removing something from the game needed, which was alternate factions that influenced the world around it in the same way the Brotherhood did with their machines at the end of the plot and things like that. Because if they were wiped out, they wouldn't be flying everywhere shooting at things, And that made the end of the plot interesting, and we needed more of that throughout the game, not just at the end. Like, I'll say Automatron, like for instance, that was another one that influenced the whole world. You had robots appearing everywhere attacking things, but it's a theme, appearing everywhere and attacking things. They didn't have to be just attacking things. They could have been trading. You could have had a series of like traders moving around the map, right? With ulterior motives for trading. And then later on you find out they're drug pushers coming from a certain location, and they're selling drugs, and you could even join them and make a ton of money selling drugs to villagers, or you could stop them and earn the appreciation of these settlements. They might even join you automatically if you do enough attacking and enough stopping of this drug trade. Again, it adds gameplay, it adds a bit of depth, and you can make a certain area of the world the domain of the drug dealers or slavers or anything you like. Fallout 3 did it. You saw it in Fallout 3, you saw it in Fallout New Vegas. Less so in Fallout 4. Fallout 4 had a big world, which is basically the same, with the same kind of quest going on. So we added more unique factions with more ulterior motives and more quests for them that weren't just simple repeatable quests but had a story behind them. I think Fallout 4 would have been a vastly better game. It was one of those games that really needed a lot of quest mods to make it fun. Unfortunately, as I said in the previous video, the dialogue system was so terrible, quest mod makers like me didn't go near it. But it was a missed opportunity. It could have been a real star for the modding community. Instead, most people thinking, where are the mods? And mods exist for it, obviously, but not the kind of mods it needs. Besides, most of the mods it needs are being made into new world spaces like Fallout London. So, right, anyway, I'll see you in the next one.